Hi. I think I want to go over a redundant topic I've been going over, and the topic is the idea of a disconnection between your thought processes and not necessarily reality in your thought processes and the interactions, but more like the disconnection between your thinking and your and the way you describe things and using words. And obviously, we're thinking using words, and a lot of the times our perceptions and the ways that we view things and the way that we describe things and the way that we find some kind of perception surrounding our thought process describing things and the way we view things can be based on the words that we describe that can give us certain ideas and manipulate the way we think, because everything has an effect on everything. Everything has an effect on everything. It doesn't matter. Everything is an interaction. It's in the game. It's moving. It's doing something. It's interacting, causing some kind of thing. Because what would it mean if these interactions didn't mean anything? Because it's these very little interactions that mean something. The interactions mean something, but it's the interactions that cause interactions. It's the interaction itself that means something, and it's the effect of these interactions that means something, that causing other interactions. So these interactions are the things that mean something and the things that cause something. Because without the interactions meaning something, sort of like a little notion in my head, it's the very fact that this notion in my head means something based on other interactions, and the other interactions affect my notion in my head. My notion in my head is just as a little sparkle in my head, little thought, little thing that just passes my mind, means just as much as anything else because it's a thing that was affected by something else, and it's going to be something that affects something else. It takes on all roles and all different angles in describing the circumstances and the interactions of reality, because it's the victim and it's the suspect of each thing, the perpetrator and the victim. It's a perpetrator and victim, every circumstance, every instant, every little bumping molecule bumping into each other, every photon moving and interacting, all these little things. It's just a bunch of chaos in the end. It's going to mean something in the end, but it's just a bunch of moving parts, and the chaos distinction and describing a chaotic mechanism between chaos and something that's going to happen a certain way. It's going to happen a certain way, but obviously from our point of view, we can't necessarily know it's going to happen a certain way or what way it's going to happen. There's too many variables in describing the situation. But it's chaos in the end because it doesn't really describe any other circumstance in the circumstance itself, and the circumstance is just moving around, bumping around, causing a circumstance to happen. And in the end, our description is all we have, our thinking and our describing. And between thinking and processing things, we obviously process things thinking subconsciously, consciously. We take in things from the environment, and then we try to say things, and we try to interact. We try to have another interaction by speaking, and we try to portray that to someone else and describing another situation. And that's exactly what we're doing, is describing a situation and describing another situation and describing another situation. And that's exactly the game we're playing. And we're just one thing leading to another, chasing our tail, and all just chasing and going around in a circle, ball rolling down an endless hill. And then let it go, keep rolling, and it's just going to keep going around in circles. It's going to go over the same mark, the same burnt mark on the ball over and over again. It's going to keep going and going and going and going, and there's nothing you can do to stop the ball. It's just going to keep on doing the same thing over and over again. So there's a disconnect, and it has to go through so many different processes. We have to say something, and then we have to think something. We have to process information based on something in the environment, either it be another sentient being or something else that's non-sentient. And then we look at it, we interact with it, we process the information, and then we find ways to think about the information. We process it subconsciously. We consciously think about the information based on subconscious thought processes that are constantly manipulating what we think. In many ways, and something could just change out of the snap of a finger, and all of a sudden we're thinking something completely, I'm trying, tip of the tongue, I can't think of the word, then you think of the word all of a sudden because some subconscious thought process that controls the very mechanism of the way you think, such as you can't think of something when you're thinking of something very similar to the definition or the way the word's described, and you think about something different, that can be described as a subconscious thought process. You have to think of something completely different before you can remember the word again. Okay, that's a subconscious thought mechanism or process that's controlling how you think and what you're going to think and how you're thinking, how you're interacting with your processes. So obviously you go through that process, then you think about it in many cases, unless you're viscerally reacting. But when you're trying to think about something, obviously you go through the process of processing it, subconsciously interpreting it, and then you interpret it consciously, and you think about it based on a bunch of subconscious jerks happening in your head. But the conscious thought doesn't mean anything beyond just something, that interaction based on a bunch of different interactions, leading up to a kind of moving aura that's constantly changing and leading to an idea which you find a way to interpret using words. so that someone else can understand what you're saying. And it's about communication and language, and that's obviously a very important mechanism describing and getting us to where we are now, but it's getting us to where we are is to a dead end. We're not getting anywhere. It's better off stagnating or letting the things the nature control, the nature control us. But obviously, this is to reach an end and make life better. But obviously, it's just going to lead to the same old detriment that created the existence to begin with. We're trying to make life better, obviously, in many ways. We're making life better, but the life getting better only leads to a dead end in making life better, because it can only get so good because we can only change the fundamental aspects of reality so much. We cannot change the bedrock. We can only change the mud and the clay above it. And the bedrock is the foundation. That's the foundation from which you build it upon. And the bedrock's all sorts of jaggies, and it's all sorts of uneven, and you can only do so much to make it uneven. You can only try your best to make it as even as possible, to a certain degree. And when you get to a certain point, you can make it even, but the evenness can only be reached once you die. At least when it comes to sentient life experiencing the game that we're experiencing, and that's, you can only go through so much. And that's exactly what we're the victim of, is the circumstance. And describing, so we're thinking these things through, we're processing the information, and then we find a way to describe it. So it goes through all these processes. And like I say about the going in the year, saying something and it comes back to you completely differently, or in some circumstances it could change and come back to the same thing, the same way that you first said it. You say, Sally sits on top of a boat, and then it comes back as something completely different, like dilly dally dilly dooley, and it comes back as something completely different. And obviously it's about a misinterpretation. It goes through all these interpretations, all these processes, and that thing can obviously change. And that's another disconnection, describing the circumstances. I'm just trying to describe something and having this disconnection between reality, and it's a different way of describing the circumstances. We're trying to describe all these different mechanisms and intervals and variables in the mechanism of describing life and the mechanism at work here. So obviously there's a disconnection there as well. So I think that's all I have time for right now. So thank you, and until next time. Bye.